What if a completely legal cash withdrawal from your own bank account suddenly caused your account to be reviewed, delayed your payments, and created weeks of financial stress for your family? Most people assume that if their money is earned legally and taxes are paid properly, withdrawing cash from the bank is just another normal transaction. But many people do not realize that banks in the United States are legally required to monitor certain financial patterns and report unusual activity under federal banking regulations. This does not mean that every large withdrawal leads to an investigation, and it absolutely does not mean ordinary people are doing something wrong by using their own money. But misunderstanding how financial reporting systems work can sometimes create unnecessary complications, especially for immigrants, green card holders, small business owners, and families who rely heavily on cash transactions. So, for the next several minutes, we are going to break down how federal cash reporting rules actually work in the United States, what kinds of transactions banks are legally required to monitor, how automated banking systems identify unusual activity, and what practical steps people can take to reduce misunderstandings and protect themselves financially. A retired engineer living in California once decided to pay a contractor in cash for a home renovation project. The contractor offered a discount for cash payment, which is still common in many industries. Over several days, the homeowner withdrew several $1,000s from his account through normal ATM and bank transactions. A short time later, his bank temporarily restricted parts of his account activity while reviewing the transactions internally. Automatic payments were delayed, and the family experienced several stressful weeks while the issue was resolved. Eventually, the situation was cleared because the transactions were legitimate and properly documented, but the experience taught the family an important lesson. The issue was not that the withdrawals were illegal. The issue was that large or repeated cash activity can sometimes trigger automated compliance reviews under banking regulations designed to detect fraud, money laundering, identity theft, tax evasion, and organized financial crime. Many people never hear about these systems until they personally experience a delay, review, or request for documentation. Banks rarely explain the details during ordinary transactions because much of the reporting process happens automatically behind the scenes through compliance software that reviews account activity every day. To understand why this happens, you first need to understand how financial reporting laws work in America. Under the Bank Secrecy Act and related federal regulations, banks and financial institutions are required to report certain kinds of cash activity to the federal government. One of the most widely known reports is called a Currency Transaction Report, commonly referred to as a CTR. Generally, if a cash transaction exceeds $10,000 in a single business day, the bank is required to file a report with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, also known as FinCEN. This applies to deposits, withdrawals, exchanges of currency, and other qualifying cash transactions. The filing itself is not an accusation of wrongdoing. It is simply part of the bank's legal reporting obligations. Millions of CTRs are filed every year in the United States. Most never lead to any additional action. Many involve completely lawful activity such as business deposits, vehicle purchases, family savings, property sales, or construction payments. The existence of a report alone does not mean someone is under investigation. Another type of report is called a Suspicious Activity Report, or SAR. Financial institutions are required to file these reports when they detect activity that appears unusual, inconsistent, or potentially connected to fraud or criminal conduct. Importantly, a SAR does not automatically mean someone committed a crime. It simply alerts regulators that the bank noticed activity it considered unusual enough to document. Many ordinary customers never realize that patterns can matter just as much as the dollar amount itself. Multiple cash withdrawals or deposits over a short period of time may attract additional scrutiny if the bank's monitoring systems interpret the activity as unusual compared to the customer's normal banking behavior. That is why financial experts often recommend keeping clear records for major cash transactions, especially when paying contractors, purchasing vehicles, handling business income, or making large personal purchases. Documentation matters. Contracts matter. Receipts matter. Clear explanations matter. There is also another federal issue many people misunderstand called structuring. Structuring refers to intentionally breaking up transactions specifically to avoid reporting requirements. Under federal law, deliberately attempting to evade mandatory reporting rules can create legal problems even when the money itself was earned legally. This is where confusion becomes dangerous for ordinary people. Some individuals incorrectly believe that keeping transactions below certain amounts automatically avoids attention or reporting. In reality, financial institutions monitor patterns, not just single transactions. Trying to stay under the limit can sometimes create more concern instead of less. That is why financial attorneys and compliance professionals often advise people to conduct legitimate transactions openly and honestly rather than trying to organize transactions around reporting thresholds. For immigrants and green card holders, financial misunderstandings can feel especially stressful because many families worry about how government records and compliance reviews might affect immigration matters. In most situations, ordinary lawful banking activity does not affect immigration status. However, unresolved fraud allegations, financial crimes, or documentation issues can become serious legal matters, which is why accurate records and legal guidance are important. One reason these stories spread so quickly online is because people hear partial information mixed with fear. Some videos make it sound as if every ATM withdrawal automatically places someone on a government watch list. That is not true. Millions of Americans make cash withdrawals every single day without any issue at all. The real issue is understanding that banks operate under federal compliance systems designed to detect suspicious financial behavior. Most people will never experience any problem. But if unusual patterns trigger a review, having proper documentation can make resolving the issue much easier and faster. Another area people should understand involves money service businesses such as check cashing stores, currency exchanges, and money transfer providers. These businesses are also subject to federal reporting rules and identification requirements. In some regions, additional reporting requirements may apply under temporary federal orders aimed at combating organized crime and money laundering activity. Again, the purpose of these systems is law enforcement and financial crime prevention, not targeting ordinary working families. But many people simply do not realize how much financial data modern banking systems collect and retain. Every major bank today uses sophisticated monitoring software. These systems compare customer behavior against thousands of risk indicators. The software looks at transaction size, frequency, account history, unusual spending behavior, geographic activity, and sudden changes in financial habits. For example, if someone normally withdraws a few $100s per week and suddenly begins withdrawing several $1,000s in cash repeatedly over a short period, the system may automatically flag the account for review. That does not mean the customer did something illegal. It simply means the activity looked unusual compared to the account's normal pattern. This is important because many people believe only large amounts matter. In reality, context matters too. A transaction that appears ordinary for a business owner may appear unusual for a retiree with a long history of low cash activity. Banks evaluate the full picture, not only the amount itself. Another misunderstanding involves ATM withdrawals. Many people believe ATM activity is invisible because the money comes directly from their own account, but ATM withdrawals are still electronic banking transactions recorded by the financial institution. The location, time, amount, frequency, and account behavior are all digitally stored. Again, this does not mean people should fear using ATMs. It simply means people should understand that modern banking systems are highly monitored and heavily regulated. There are also practical financial reasons to avoid carrying or using large amounts of cash whenever possible. Cash can be lost, stolen, or impossible to recover. Electronic payments provide receipts, transaction histories, and clearer legal protection if disputes occur later. For example, imagine paying a contractor $9,000 in cash without a detailed invoice or written agreement. If the work is never completed or a dispute arises, proving payment becomes much more difficult. A documented bank transfer or check creates a clearer legal record. This is one reason many financial professionals encourage consumers to reduce unnecessary cash usage for large purchases whenever practical. Electronic transactions generally provide more accountability for both sides. Another important point involves joint accounts. Many families do not realize that if a bank temporarily reviews or restricts a shared account, it can affect every person connected to it. Mortgage payments, utility bills, grocery purchases, tuition payments, and automatic subscriptions may all be disrupted at the same time. This is why financial advisors often recommend maintaining emergency savings and backup payment methods separate from primary accounts. Even temporary banking issues can create major stress if families depend entirely on a single account for every expense. Small business owners face additional challenges because many legitimate businesses still operate heavily with cash. Restaurants, food trucks, convenience stores, salons, repair shops, market vendors, transportation businesses, and cleaning services often receive frequent cash payments from customers. For these businesses, consistent bookkeeping becomes extremely important. Daily deposit records, receipts, invoices, payroll documentation, and organized accounting can help demonstrate that the business activity is legitimate and lawful. Poor record keeping creates risk because banks and regulators may have difficulty understanding where the money came from or why transaction patterns appear unusual. Clear accounting reduces confusion. Another major issue is misinformation shared within communities. Sometimes people receive inaccurate advice from friends, relatives, coworkers, or even social media influencers who do not fully understand banking regulations themselves. One common myth is that depositing or withdrawing less than $10,000 automatically avoids attention from the bank. Another myth is that spreading transactions across several days guarantees privacy. These assumptions can be misleading because banks evaluate overall behavior patterns, not only single transactions. People should also understand that banks themselves can face enormous penalties if they fail to monitor suspicious activity properly. Federal regulators have fined financial institutions billions of dollars over the years for failing to comply with anti-money laundering laws and financial reporting requirements. As a result, banks take compliance very seriously. Employees are trained to identify unusual activity, and many decisions are driven by automated systems rather than personal judgment. Sometimes customers become frustrated because they feel treated unfairly when a transaction is questioned or delayed. But from the bank's perspective, federal law requires monitoring and reporting procedures. Frontline employees often have very little control over automated compliance decisions. Another important area people should understand is identity verification. When conducting large financial transactions, banks may request identification, documentation, or additional explanations regarding the source and purpose of funds. This is a standard part of financial compliance in many situations. Providing accurate information honestly and calmly is usually the best approach. Becoming defensive or attempting to hide details can create unnecessary complications, even when the activity itself is lawful. There is also a growing misunderstanding online about the relationship between financial systems and immigration systems. Some content creators exaggerate these connections in ways that create unnecessary fear. Ordinary legal banking activity alone does not normally place someone at risk of losing immigration status. However, genuine financial crimes such as fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, money laundering, or deliberate falsification of records can absolutely create serious legal and immigration consequences. That distinction is extremely important. This is why honesty, transparency, and proper documentation matter so much. Lawful transactions supported by clear records are very different from intentionally deceptive financial conduct. Another practical recommendation involves keeping personal and business finances separate. Many small business owners mix household expenses and business transactions within the same account, which can create confusing financial patterns. Separate accounts make bookkeeping easier and help demonstrate legitimate business activity more clearly. People should also review their bank statements regularly. Fraudulent activity, unauthorized charges, or suspicious transactions should be reported immediately. Monitoring your accounts consistently not only protects against theft, but also helps you understand your own financial patterns more clearly. In addition, maintaining communication with your bank can sometimes prevent unnecessary problems. If you expect to conduct an unusually large legitimate transaction, notifying your bank ahead of time may help reduce confusion or delays. For example, if you are purchasing a vehicle, paying for major medical treatment, buying equipment for a business, or making a large renovation payment, informing your financial institution beforehand can sometimes make the process smoother. Another area people often overlook is the emotional effect financial disruptions can have on families. Even temporary account restrictions can create panic when automatic payments fail unexpectedly. Parents worry about rent, groceries, tuition, utilities, and medical expenses. Elderly family members may fear scams or identity theft. Financial stress spreads quickly through households because modern life depends heavily on uninterrupted banking access. That is why organization and preparation matter so much. Emergency planning is also important. Families should consider maintaining copies of key financial documents, backup access to emergency funds, updated contact information for financial institutions, and secure records of major transactions. If questions ever arise, quick access to organized documentation can dramatically reduce stress and confusion. People should also be cautious about carrying extremely large amounts of physical cash. Aside from financial reporting considerations, large cash amounts can create safety risks involving theft or loss. Once physical cash disappears, recovery is often impossible. Electronic payment systems are not perfect, but they usually provide stronger consumer protections, transaction histories, and dispute resolution options compared to undocumented cash exchanges. Another point worth understanding is that federal financial regulations continue evolving over time. Reporting requirements, compliance standards, and enforcement priorities may change depending on new laws, technology, or national security concerns. This is one reason outdated internet advice can become unreliable very quickly. Financial guidance should come from credible, current sources whenever possible. For immigrants especially, fear and misinformation can sometimes prevent people from using normal banking services entirely. Some individuals rely heavily on cash because they worry banks are unsafe or because they misunderstand how reporting systems work. But operating entirely outside the banking system can create different problems, including security risks, difficulty building credit history, limited financial protections, and challenges proving income or financial stability later. Responsible banking with proper documentation is usually safer and more practical than avoiding financial institutions altogether. Another thing people should understand is that compliance reviews do not always happen immediately. Sometimes unusual patterns are reviewed automatically, weeks or even months after transactions occur. This can confuse customers who assumed everything was fine because the transaction was originally approved. Banks also communicate with customers differently during reviews depending on the situation. In many cases, customers may simply receive requests for verification or clarification. In more serious cases, accounts may be temporarily restricted while compliance teams review activity internally. Most reviews are eventually resolved through ordinary documentation and verification procedures, but delays can still create significant inconvenience, especially for families living paycheck to paycheck or relying on automatic payments for essential expenses. This is why financial experts consistently emphasize preparation, documentation, and transparency instead of secrecy or avoidance strategies. There is also an important lesson here about financial literacy. Many hardworking people spend decades earning money without ever being taught how banking compliance systems actually work. Schools rarely explain these topics. Families often learn through experience instead of education. As a result, many ordinary people unintentionally make financial decisions based on rumors instead of facts. Understanding the rules does not mean living in fear. It means making informed choices. For example, if you need to pay a contractor legally, there is nothing wrong with that. The key is handling the transaction responsibly, keeping records, and using transparent payment methods whenever practical. If you own a cash-heavy business, there is nothing inherently suspicious about legitimate cash income. The key is accurate bookkeeping, consistent accounting, and organized records. If you withdraw cash for travel, emergencies, or family support, that alone does not make you a criminal. But understanding how financial institutions monitor unusual patterns helps you avoid confusion later. Another critical point is consumer rights. If you ever face serious allegations or financial disputes, professional legal guidance matters. Do not rely entirely on internet opinions or community rumors during major legal or financial situations. Qualified attorneys understand how financial regulations, banking procedures, and documentation standards actually work. Early legal guidance can prevent misunderstandings from becoming larger problems. People should also avoid panic when hearing dramatic stories online. Social media often amplifies extreme situations because fear attracts attention. Some creators intentionally exaggerate risks to generate views and engagement. The reality is usually more balanced. Millions of lawful financial transactions happen every day without issue. Most Americans never experience serious banking compliance problems. But understanding the system still matters because preparation reduces stress if questions ever arise. Technology has also transformed modern banking surveillance. Automated systems today can analyze patterns much faster than human employees could in the past. Artificial intelligence tools and transaction monitoring software review enormous amounts of financial data continuously. Again, this does not mean ordinary people are personally targeted. It simply reflects how modern compliance systems operate in highly regulated financial environments. At the same time, consumers still have rights and protections under the law. Financial reviews are not convictions. Requests for documentation are not proof of criminal conduct. Most compliance questions are resolved through ordinary verification processes. The most effective response is usually calm cooperation, accurate documentation, and professional advice when necessary. So what practical steps can people take starting today? First, avoid organizing transactions around reporting thresholds. Conduct legitimate transactions normally and honestly, instead of trying to stay below specific numbers. Second, whenever possible, use traceable payment methods for major purchases or contractor payments. Electronic records provide clarity and protection. Third, maintain documentation for significant financial activity before questions ever arise. Contracts, invoices, receipts, licenses, and written agreements can save enormous stress later. Fourth, monitor your bank accounts regularly and respond quickly if your bank requests verification or additional information. Ignoring notices can make problems worse. Fifth, separate business and personal finances whenever practical to create cleaner financial records. Sixth, maintain emergency savings and backup payment options in case temporary banking disruptions occur unexpectedly. Seventh, consult licensed professionals for serious financial or immigration concerns instead of relying on internet rumors or fear-based content. And finally, remember this important point. Most ordinary Americans and immigrants who use banks legally never experience serious problems from normal financial activity. The purpose of financial monitoring laws is to detect criminal activity, not punish hardworking families using their own money responsibly. But understanding how the system works can help people avoid unnecessary misunderstandings, protect their finances, and make smarter decisions about cash transactions in the future. The modern financial system is heavily automated. Banks use software systems that monitor patterns, identify unusual activity, and comply with federal reporting laws every single day. Most customers never notice these systems because their transactions never create issues. But knowing the rules ahead of time allows you to navigate the system more confidently and responsibly. Protect your records, keep your finances organized, Use clear documentation, build good banking habits, and make financial decisions based on facts instead of fear. Share this information with someone who may benefit from understanding how financial reporting systems actually work, especially older adults, immigrants, small business owners, and families who regularly handle large cash transactions without fully understanding the regulations involved. Awareness and preparation can prevent unnecessary stress, confusion, and financial disruption in the future. This content is provided by Golden Seniors Hub strictly for educational and informational purposes only, and does not constitute legal, financial, banking, or immigration advice. Laws and regulations may change over time, and individual situations vary significantly. For guidance specific to your personal circumstances, consult a licensed attorney, certified financial professional, or qualified banking compliance expert in your jurisdiction.